solar system or this type of research deserves more study, the mainstream science is quickly like, oh, no, it's not there, couldn't be. And where I have a discrepancy is that all the things that they've been citing for a Planet X in the last 10 years, Sedna, Quasar, Xena, no. These are all little ice balls floating around out there. The planet we're talking about, cited by the ancient cultures as well that does exist, is 4 to 8 times the size of Earth. Big planet. Not something you can miss, and not something that's going to be a little floating ice ball beyond Pluto. So if we do find this planet, it'll be very interesting to collaborate with a lot of these findings that have been happening and coming out over the years here. And just recently, I think the date on this article here is August 12th or something, but large Planet X may lurk beyond Pluto. So this research is still mainstream cutting edge right now for the idea that it's pushing the envelope of astronomy and trying to pierce through the veil of understandings that, they wanted to try and demote Pluto to not being a planet. Well, why don't we just stick to what we have and kind of be a little bit more open-minded to the idea that not everything we think is in place is. So where this turns for my personal interest is the fact that, again, what I'm going to now show you is there's a bunch of ancient knowledge coming from sources that can be verified, artifacts, tablets, and things that we have evidence from ancient cultures that are very astute astronomically that tell us there's another planet in our solar system. And not only is there another planet in our solar system, but there's beings that live on that planet. So there's a very infamous author named Zecharia Sitchin. He's wrote a series of books called the Earth Chronicles. Over 50 years of research. Zecharia Sitchin's a linguist, studies ancient languages, is one of about 220 people in the world that can actually translate Sumerian cuneiform script directly. And so he's wrote a series of books, mainly focusing on Sumerian legacy of information and how that is filtered into all the other cultures. Now, why Zecharia Sitchin really caught my attention with archaeology and ancient cultures, all the other linguists or archaeologists out there will focus on one artifact, or the linguists will focus on one word, the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, but they don't put it into a bigger context of what it all means. What are they doing? What does this mean? And so there's always going to be discrepancies in the mainstream community for the accepted explanations or definitions of a lot of the things I'm going to show you. Now, the reason why I stick with Sitchin is because he puts it in an overall context. He's not just debating the word Nephilim. He's putting it into an overall context of what they were, what they meant, and it's not just in one language. It spans many languages. So what I'm going to do is focus on one culture specifically, kind of where all this originally started, and that's Sumer, modern-day Iraq. 6,000 years ago, we have a culture that comes up right out of the Stone Age called Sumer. Eventually it became Mesopotamia, Babylon, and today's Iraq. So this fertile strip of land here, called Mesopotamia, right between the Tigris and Euphrates River, has some very interesting properties for the artifacts that we've been pulling out. Now, in the late 1800s, a person with the British Museum was doing excavations. Most of the artifacts that have been found in Iraq are all stored in the British Museum, and you can visit them there and see it. He pulled out a tablet, which I'll show you here in a minute. He pulled out a tablet that in stone on this ancient cuneiform script. Again, this is 1890, around there. It starts to talk about how a Sumerian god chose a Sumerian man, in cuneiform script, mind you, 6,000-year-old stone tablet, to build an ark, to build a big boat, because there's going to be a flood. There's going to be a great excess of water as their planet comes by. So there's this Sumerian tale, which literally word for word is the Noah's Ark tale, but it's 2,000 years removed from the time of the Hebrew God of Abraham, or any time of Jesus and like a Noah in that time frame in the Christian Bible. This is a Sumerian tale that's 2,000 years removed from any other version of a biblical Noah's Ark tale. So it could be, for all intents and purposes, the original. So in a lot of these other stone tablets that discuss biblical tales, which we can find an iteration of a biblical tale in the Sumerian form, unchanged in stone, have a lot of parallels to modern biblical tales. Things about Genesis. The Bible talks about a time when there were giants upon the earth. Sumerians talked about living amongst their beings, or their gods, the Anunnaki. They said that they lived amongst these beings that had day-to-day interactions with them. So a lot of the things that they recorded on these things, which this here is basically a stone tablet. They used something with a round stone kind of reverse carved imprint, like a reverse image. And they would roll this positive image over wet clay, leaving the imprint, and would fire in the kiln, making it stone. So they left us hundreds of thousands of these tablets, which show all types of various pieces of information. And this one, you see here actually a little description from the British Museum describing like what you're seeing here. And what's interesting is that if you look here closely, you see the seven dots, you see this here, now, in the British Museum, these seven dots are being represented as the seven sisters of Pleiades, the Pleiades constellation. Sisson says, no, that's not Pleiades, that's Earth. The seven dots representing Earth. We are on the seventh planet. When the Anunnaki came here, they said, you're on the seventh planet. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So if you look at all the planets here, starting at Pluto, and you go in, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. T, the sacred number 7, 7 days in a week, 7 tablets of creation, 7 days of Genesis. The Sumerians were told by the Anunnaki, when we came into your solar system, you were on the 7th planet. Now the hit term here is the third rock from the sun, but no. Actually coming into our solar system, Earth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is the 7th planet. So a lot of this information comes out from the Sumerian details about astronomical pieces of our solar system, the distance between the planets, what the planets look like in space. And we can test this information because over time we've sent probes out there, Galileo and Voyager, and they took measurements of the outer planets for the first time, seeing the planets in color, and sure enough, they matched the Sumerian descriptions from 6,000 years ago of Mosh C, Uranus being a greenish-blue planet. They had accurate descriptions of the distance between the planets. But where the discrepancy came up is that, you see, in the early 1900s, we're pulling out Sumerian tablets talking about outer planets, the distance between the planets. Pluto wasn't discovered until 1930. So in the early 1900s, all these things about Anunnaki, these winged beings would kind of look like angels, or distance between the planets, was all thrown into a big myth pile and left untouched, basically, by modern astronomy and sciences. So a lot of the information that starts to kind of raise the eyebrows just from a layman's point of view about the Sumerian information is that we know that from the time of Copernicus and Galileo, man thought that we were the center of the universe. That basically, everything orbited us. Until we became smart enough to realize that that's not the case, that we orbit the sun. Well, interestingly enough, the Sumerians noted our planet's structure correctly on a tablet that's 6,000 years old. Here you have a scene where the god is granting commands to plow, modern agriculture. But as a backdrop to this cylinder seal, you see here a complete model of our solar system with the sun in the center, and all the little planets that we know of correctly displayed. Now, how could they know that the sun was in the center of the solar system? We didn't know this until we started using mathematical calculations and telescopes to say, wow, we actually are orbiting the sun. So they had this down correctly right out of the Stone Age. What taught them? How did they know this? Here's an interesting tablet. Another thing is that they didn't think the ancient people were familiar with the shape of an ellipse, like a wheel. Here it is, circular tablet. Now, interestingly enough, on this tablet, this little portion here, even though it's badly damaged, this little portion alone was translated by Zecharia Sitchin, and you can see it has some very interesting information. What it translates to basically talk about is the path that the Anunnaki god Enlil took to get from Nibiru to Earth, and he would have to make course corrections. So here, the term for this was Nibiru. You can see the list here, the names of the planets, and it talks about here when God Enlil went by the planets. You can even see here on the side, the text is like rocket, rocket, mountain, mountain, pile up, high, high, high. What is this doing in this 6,000-year-old culture? So a lot of the other things that they left us that we can pinpoint to say, wow, they are on it. They left us astronomical information in texts, sacred texts that were handed down over hundreds of years. They could predict on what day, 50 years in advance, a lunar eclipse was going to take place. They tracked the orbit of planets over hundreds of years and followed their orbits in the sky. So they were very astute astronomers. And the information that they tell us about another planet in our solar system, beings living on this planet, our science hasn't yet been able to confirm that. But as after one or two or 100 coincidences, which I'm going to show you here, you have to start to wonder, like, well, wait a minute, what's really going on? How could they have known all this information? This one, again, just shows documentation of observation of the stars over hundreds of years, just showing you just various tablets. These are stored in the British Museum, some are in Turkey. This one, just various Sumerian cuneiform script, sometimes also done on precious stones or granite. But you can see the detail of some of these things. It's very interesting. Now, this one is a very interesting seal because you can see here in the sky there's a glowing cross, or there's a cross depicted in the sky. Now, that's the actual symbol the Sumerians described for Nibiru. Nibiru stood for planet of the crossing, and they symbolized this very early on as a glowing cross in the sky of where the gods came from, way before Christianity and Jesus on the cross. So they actually had little descriptions and cylinder seals to denote Nibiru. Now, originally, Nibiru was in the form of a cross, and here's a cylinder seal imprint. This is from Zechariah Sitchin's book, from the Earth Chronicles. You can see here the plowing field, the sun, and in daylight, they're looking up at awe at that glowing cross in the sky. The glowing cross eventually is transversed into other cultures as the winged disc. And we can see this showing up in I don't know what this means here, but I understand the symbology being shown. Through Sitchin's research, what we're looking at here is Earth, the seven dots of Earth, and its crescent moon, and Nibiru, a glowing cross. So that's a symbolic seal that they were using, and you'll see these symbols over and over again for the representations of the planets. The idea that the heavens were divided up into 12 parts, the zodiac, that's the Sumerian first, the divisional of the heavens into 12 parts. So a lot of this information and the math that's displayed, we'll talk about that number 12 too in a minute, is just very interesting. This tablet I find just unbelievable. It's basically telling part of a story, a much longer story of an epic of Gilgamesh, and it's a form of the epic of creation that we have in the Bible, like Genesis and the 7 days of creation. Well, this tells a much more, this is on 11 tablets, and it's a much more detailed understanding and explanation about how Earth came to be and how we show up on Earth. So, there is a Sumerian tale in this epic of Gilgamesh, and also in the Enuma Elish, another version of the sacred text, that talks about how in the very early on of our solar system, before the planets had become solid masses, another planet appears, and they called it an intruder planet. And they said that this planet was attracted by the inner part of our solar system and got sucked into the inner part of our solar system, and in doing so, when it passed by Jupiter and got by the inner planets, it had this interaction with our now Earth, was then called Tiamat. It didn't hit our planet, but the moon of planet X whacked our primitive Earth, then called Tiamat, so hard, the Sumerians say, that that's what strewed out the asteroid belt, that initial collision, and it put Earth in its new orbit where it is now. So if you look at the solar system model that we have now, and that's the orbit now planet X, or the Nibiru now takes, is a very elliptical orbit around the sun. Let me back up for a second. It's an interesting thing to note, and I think I have a model of this in a second, but the